Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast. Good morning. It's Monday, the 2nd of February. I'm Caroline Hepke in London.
And I'm Stephen Carroll in Brussels. Coming up today, scrutiny grows over Jeffrey Epstein's ties to Mandelson, Lutnick and a host of other powerful business and political figures.
Gold and silver continue to plunge amid intense selling pressure.
Plus, seeking to stay in the driving seat, why Mercedes is doubling down on luxury cars to help pay for its shift to electric vehicles.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
The fallout is growing following Friday's release of around 3 million pages of material related to the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Britain's former ambassador to the United States, Peter Mandelson, has resigned his Labour Party membership over his links to the disgraced financier. Mandelson says that he took the decision to avoid further embarrassment after documents revealed that payments totalling £75,000 were made by Epstein to him and his partner in 2003. The documents also show that in 2009, Mandelson attempted to prevent the UK from introducing a tax on bankers' bonuses following a request from Epstein. Mandelson, who remains a peer in the House of Lords, says he believes the allegations of financial payments to him by Epstein are false and need investigating by him.
Among the material are images appearing to show former British Prince Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor kneeling over a woman. UK Cabinet Minister Steve Reid says that the former Prince should now testify before the US Congress about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
The principle here is very, very clear. If Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor clearly has insight into what was going on, and he should testify because the victims deserve and need him and anybody else who may have witnessed things to do that.
Steve Reid was speaking as UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer also called on Prince Andrew to testify. The growing pressure comes as the wider document release reveals fresh insights into the rich and well-connected figures who circulated in the orbit of the late disgraced financier. The documents show that some individuals, including US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and former Microsoft executive Steven Sinofsky, maintained contact with Epstein for longer than they had previously claimed. Lutnick told the New York Times on Friday that he, quote, spent zero time with Epstein, but declined to comment on the documents. Representatives from Andreessen Horowitz did not respond to a request for comment.
The price of gold is falling further after its biggest plunge in a decade, reversing a record-breaking rally that appeared to have run too far, too fast. The spot price has slumped by as much as 7.9% today, while silver has also plunged by as much as 14% in a volatile session. The sell-off was sparked on Friday after US President Donald Trump announced he would nominate Kevin Warsh to lead the Federal Reserve. That sent the dollar higher and undercut sentiment among investors who'd bet on Trump's willingness to let the currency weaken. Precious metals have risen to an all-time highs as investors piled into gold and silver on renewed concerns about geopolitical turmoil, currency debasement and the Federal Reserve's independence.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer says that he still wants the UK to join the European Union's €150 billion defence fund after negotiations last year ended in failure. He told reporters over the weekend that it, quote, makes good sense for Europe in the widest sense of the word to work more closely together as the continent looks to counter Russian aggression. Starmer's remarks came ahead of a series of meetings between senior UK and EU officials in London this week. If a deal is reached, British defence firms would be able to bid for contracts funded by SAFE, the Security Action for Europe programme.
Iran's supreme leader has warned of a regional war as President Trump threatens military action. The news comes after weeks of escalating tensions over Tehran's deadly crackdown on civilian protests. In a broadcast on state television yesterday, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said the Iranian people will strike back forcefully against anyone who wants to attack or cause harm. Speaking to reporters in Florida over the weekend, the US president said his forces are ready to act.
We have the biggest, most powerful ships in the world over there, very close, a couple of days, and hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right.
President Trump also said he's hopeful that Iran and the US will reach a deal. Oil prices have plunged, however, after Trump disclosed talks between Washington and Iran, and geopolitical risk premiums faded.
British engine maker Rolls-Royce has halted its plans to put a nuclear reactor on the moon by the end of the decade. The Telegraph reports that the UK government-backed programme is at a standstill due to a lack of potential partners. Bloomberg's Freddie Fulston has more.
Could nuclear power be used to support a moon base for astronauts? Backed by millions in government funding, Rolls-Royce had been looking to answer that question. However, the UK firm said that for now at least, there are no current contracts in place to progress the project. By contrast, NASA in the US is accelerating plans to develop nuclear power on the moon. In London, Freddie Fulston, Bloomberg Radio.
And those are our top stories for you this morning. Looking at the markets, we have a major sell-off for some of the asset classes that did so well in January. Gold at the moment slumping 7.3%. Silver is also declining very strongly. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is up by 0.2%. This after the announcement of Kevin Warsh as President Trump's pick to lead the Fed. Richard Clarida over at PIMCO saying that Warsh brings intriguing ideas on ways to change and potentially improve how the Fed operates. In terms of other risk sentiment worsening, Bitcoin briefly sliding below $75,000. Currently we're just above that level. This as we've also seen concerns around tech names. Nasdaq stock futures are currently down 1.7%. US Stocks 50 futures also slumping 1% right now.
In a moment, more on what we learned from the release of the latest Jeffrey Epstein files. Plus, we'll discuss Mercedes' strategy of doubling down on its luxury cars. But another story that caught our eye this morning on using AI to write social media posts. Laura Kelly's been writing about how users on LinkedIn are now policing posts on the networking site for their use of AI. This is the creeping sameness that you'll have seen emerging in some of those posts. Now, as if LinkedIn wasn't bland enough already, and I say that as someone who uses the platform regularly, but some of the quirks that have become hallmarks of AI writing, the M-dash, the Oxford comma, some say. I don't know why people care so much for the Oxford comma, but anyway, big words, repetition of ideas, the not just X but Y formulation, certain kinds of syntax, using emojis apparently is all red flags. I mean, I'm guilty of all of this, so I don't know how closely I'm aligned to AI on this as well. So users on LinkedIn, Caroline, are not happy, and they're telling people about it loudly.
Yeah. I find that really funny. Look, I get it. I mean, AI is kind of challenging everyone's idea of what it is to be creative, to be a human being, to write creatively. I think it's a weird process. We'll probably adapt. People do seem to begin to realise that actually outsourcing your intelligence, your creativity to AI maybe leaves something to be desired. I don't know. People want human connection. Do they want it on LinkedIn? Oh, I'm not sure. But anyway.
Well, there's also the question of where does AI end and we begin? Are we now aping some of the formulations of AI because they've become so common on these websites as well? It's a fascinating story. We'll put a link to it in our podcast show notes.
Okay, let's bring you more now on the latest revelations from the Epstein files released by the US Department of Justice. Our reporter Tiwa Adebayo is here with more. Look, the quantity of documents, of photographs and videos released is absolutely enormous, and many media outlets have spent the last couple of days focusing on this. Frankly, around the world, it shows new links to prominent investors, political figures and lawyers and so many others. What does it show? What do you highlight, Tiwa?
Oh, exactly, Caroline. There is a lot of information in this latest release. It's more than 2,000 videos and some 180,000 images. But I think one of the main takeaways for me is that it really sheds light on the full extent of Epstein's network and also just how close some of those relationships were. I mean, the emails feature things like nicknames, gifts, advice. This suggests quite deeply personal ties. There are some big names really from sort of every walk of life. So we're talking about finance, business, the likes of Elon Musk, who has said that he repeatedly denied invitations from Epstein and that he pushed very hard for these files to be released. Politics, the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has also mentioned he said that he spent zero time with Epstein. But perhaps one of the most striking revelations from these files is an insight into how Epstein viewed himself and his operations. There's a really interesting clip which has been released as part of this information dump. It's an interview where he's speaking about some of the money that he earned and saying that his money isn't dirty, but emphasizing his role as a philanthropist. Here's a clip of him speaking about that.
The money I gave to help try to eradicate polio in Pakistan and India, instead of asking me whether that money should be given to these children for vaccines, I think you might want to ask their mothers.
So that was Jeffrey Epstein speaking there. And I think it perhaps tells us something about what the disgraced financier thought of himself. We should mention that there is some reference to President Trump in these documents. It includes correspondence containing a list of unverified tips with accusations about the president as well as other notable figures. But when asked about these claims, the Justice Department has said that they are untrue and sensationalist. But for many implicated in these materials, there isn't an explicit indication of wrongdoing, but certainly there could be reputational damage, and that's what I think we'll see many mentioned struggle to fight against in the coming weeks.
And in the UK, of course, there's been two particular figures who've stood out in these latest documents as well, Peter Mandelson and Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor.
Yes, these are kind of two characters that have been really central to this story from a UK perspective. Peter Mandelson, the former UK ambassador to the US, he did have to resign from that position due to revelations about his ties to Epstein. He's now gone a step further and resigned from the Labour Party to avoid causing further embarrassment, as he puts it. And the main question towards Mandelson at the moment is over his payments, alleged payments totalling £75,000 made to him and his partner by Epstein in 2003, but also attempts to stop the UK from introducing a tax on bankers' bonuses in 2009, allegedly after a request from Epstein. In response, he has said that he believes these allegations to be false and that he has no record or recollection of the payments. In the case of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor, formerly a prince, of course, that title taken away again over his links to Epstein, Prime Minister Keir Starmer over the weekend suggesting that he should testify before a congressional committee over his dealings with Epstein. It's something he's been asked to do in November by Democrats. But Starmer is saying now that anyone with information should come forward when he was asked about Andrew's involvement. So it does seem that assessing all of those implicated in this latest release, perhaps Mandelson and Mountbatten-Windsor have suffered some of the most tangible consequences from their links so far.
Yeah, and in terms of the consequences then of this for Epstein's victims, because, as you say, a lot of this shows the depth of ties, but maybe not legal ramifications. There certainly aren't a lot of legal consequences that might flow from this, or even accusations on the basis of this. So what are the consequences for Epstein's victims?
Well, that's right, Caroline. I think the full extent of the consequences for victims is perhaps yet to be seen. I should mention that it is still unclear if all of the claims in these emails can be substantiated. There are still questions over the validity of the material involved in these releases, and many implicated have denied wrongdoing. But it remains to be seen what will happen in terms of this case. This is said to be the last release of material relating to links with Epstein that we'll see. So over the next few weeks and months, perhaps we'll see further fallout from the results of these releases.
Okay, Tiwa Adebayo, our reporter, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak Europe coming up after this. Now, Mercedes is revamping its S-Class luxury vehicles in an effort to boost returns, which will help fund the car maker's shift to electric vehicles. But the bet is now looking increasingly shaky. Our German automotive reporter Will Wilkes joins us now for more. Will, good morning. Why is the S-Class then so important to Mercedes' strategy?
The S-Class is Mercedes' technology flagship, and it's a car and its derivatives, its sister vehicles, bring in a huge amount of profits and earnings for Mercedes. So on the volume cars, the smaller cars that Mercedes sells a lot of, they don't make so much money. It really depends on these big and important cars. And it's also the vehicle that's supposed to be the company's flagship in China. And just this whole idea of Mercedes being a luxury car maker, one with high earnings, is based around this vehicle and its siblings.
Okay, what's gone wrong then with that plan?
Well, what's gone wrong is the particularly in China, which is the S-Class's biggest market and Mercedes' most profitable market, Chinese car makers that everyone kind of thinks perhaps of them making lower cost vehicles have actually decided to attack this highly profitable space. And there's a car called the Maestro S800, which is manufactured by Huawei and another company called JAC. And this is really eating into Mercedes' market share there, which really kind of flags a broader problem with German premium cars. They've for years and years sold themselves on having all these great features and being more advanced in luxury and engineering. And Chinese companies have just poured huge effort into R&D, and now they're coming up with cars that can match these cars on features. For Chinese buyers, have a bit of a made in China appeal too, but the prices are quite a lot lower. And this is starting to eat into the markets, the product markets for Porsche, for Mercedes-Benz, for BMW. And it's a real major problem for these German companies who've become incredibly dependent on China.
And in terms of the operations for Mercedes in Germany as well, there have been some additional constraints that have been placed on perhaps cost-cutting efforts by the CEO in recent years.
Yeah, as is normal in Germany, the unions have a lot of power and representation on decision-making boards. So the Mercedes CEO, Ola Källenius, when he started, agreed a deal with the unions to not make any job cuts in production, no compulsory redundancies in production until 2035, which has the advantage that you have kind of peace with your labour unions, but then it has the disadvantage that he's having to compete against companies which are bringing high quality products at much lower prices, but you're very constrained on what you can do on costs, which again makes a vehicle like the S-Class extremely important, because you can't get away from your high cost base. You have to have a super successful premium product. But then when other companies like Huawei are bringing down the prices of luxury cars, then you have a double headache there.
Okay, a double headache, but could Mercedes change course? I mean, are they going to stick to the strategy?
They might not have a choice, because I think they will stick to the strategy. Like I said, they've got this cost base that they can't get away from. Do you really want to bring down prices and compete with lower price car makers? I think what they might have to do is they will have to make adjustments, and it's kind of like driving through the fog. You just have to look kind of where you're going and be prepared to make adjustments quite quickly. But it's going to be very difficult, and I think tariffs don't help. Worsening geopolitical tensions don't help either. What Mercedes really, really doesn't need would be a global downturn because of one of these. There's a geopolitical incident. I think in that case, the problems might become even more acute.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.